going to cross live to Brisbane and have a chat with Jeff Horn, so that should be fun. Now, my Tuesday matinee this week, I just need to reach down and pull up a little book by our good friend, Steve Mascord, who's been a regular in the past on this show, has written a life memoir of sorts called Touchstones. So I'm just going to read you the first line. In fact, it was brought to my attention by Dan Gannay from Triple M last night. I think he tweeted something like, "Have you ever read a better first line in a book in your life? I was conceived in an insane asylum and don't know for sure who my natural father is." I've read bits and pieces of a couple of different chapters. It only arrived on my desk today, and some of it, as you'd expect from Steve Mascord, is beautifully crafted. He's an amazing writer.
He's a good thinker.
He merges rugby league and rock and roll, which are his two passions, and sort of covers off the search for his natural mother. And his real name is Andrew John Langley, and he spends 52 weeks and each week of those 52 weeks covering one rugby league game and attending one rock and roll gig in the view that he wants to find his former self.
Years ago, when the Super League war was on and we were working together at the Herald, we used to sit opposite facing each other, and we were talking one day, and at one point the game was in a bit of a dire space, and I said, what would you do? Because he's such a rugby league fanatic. What would you do if rugby league ever fell over? He said, "I'd write rock and roll." I said, "Really?" I was really surprised. I thought he'd go into another sport. Now, I remember during the Sydney Olympics in 2000, he had to do the swimming. He covered it from the office. He'd walk over, he'd sit there, he'd watch it on TV. He'd go and he'd file his copy on the race, and then he'd pick up a rugby league week, and he'd sit and he'd read rugby league week until the next race came. And then he'd get up and he'd watch it, and then he'd go back and he'd file quickly on that race, and then he'd pick up a rugby league week. He had no interest in the Olympics.
He's the definition of rugby league transport.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah. So Touchstones by Steve Mascord. Get out there and get yourself a copy at stevemascord.com of all places. Now, don't forget, Ask Kenty is on tonight. We want you to send through your